Another week, another episode. What did we get to?
Well, we kicked off in true tribe fashion talking about Elon Musk and the latest AI tool to be added to X.
Don has another whinge.
Pretty much.
Then we discussed OneVentures returning some capital from an investment into Employment Hero.
Then we talked about some recent rounds, including some down valuations for Appen and some commentary around that, but then leading into some positive news of 8 Aussie startups that have raised 81 million recently.
Yeah, the biggest being Leonardo.ai that raised 47 million. But what we found really interesting with the other 7 companies was the broadness of companies that had raised capital. And we got onto the ever-expanding death tech and talked a little bit about one of those companies. It's always nice to have the uplifting discussion of death and the survival of it.
And then that led into a bit of a chat on more VCs and PE getting on the boring train, looking at boring B2B tech solutions. And we unpack that a little bit and talk about why we focus there.
Boring is good. The water's warm.
Then we discussed some other AI companies that recently raised. They were Relevance and Clove.
And then we chatted about the latest Blackbird coverage and how they're coming under pressure on a couple of different fronts, and just sharing our views on their value contribution to the ecosystem. But that then led into also a broader conversation around some of the gender diversity issues in the investment landscape.
Yeah, and one of the areas that Blackbird has come under pressure for is around diversity, which led us into a great initiative called Grapevine that has been launched, and we put forward our thoughts on Grapevine and made our commitments towards it. And for this week's episode, we have special guest
Jasper.
Jasper.
We have a special guest, Cyclone Jasper. Despite my best efforts in the editing suite, that noise in the background is Aaron sitting very close to Cyclone Jasper, going over him, and the house shaking and the rain and the wind. So in the event, Aaron, you don't survive, it's been fun, and see you in the Death Tech segment.
The irony is, as soon as you said the word Jasper, the internet froze and I only heard a third of what you said.
Good. Should we get into it?
Let's go.
Sounds good.
Jack, you managed to get to Adelaide.
Yeah, I got back yesterday afternoon.
How long did it
Well
take?
done.
I left midday on Saturday. Was it 3 nights, 4 days, slowly getting through it.
And the relationship is still strong?
Yeah, still strong, still
Love
together.
Good. And you managed to find all the gas stations you need?
Yeah, and the car held up. I was a little bit worried, and everything went smoothly to plan. Every station had gas that I was expecting it to.
You executed that with such precision. So well done.
But there's no room for any error. If you run out of fuel, it's not bring me a jerry can of gas. It's like you're getting towed to the next station with gas.
Yeah. What I want to try and understand is why you hate the environment so much. But speaking of the environment, Aaron, you're hiding in a house in Cairns in a cyclone, hence
Yes.
why you've got a different background than normal.
Yes, and the wind, I was saying to Jack before, the wind's picked up overnight and it's pretty loud outside, so I'm bunkered in the back of the house. But I think it looks like it's going to be a pretty mild one. It's a Category 2. It'll hit landfall just after lunch today, and it's much further north now. So, we'll just cop some wind and rain.
The little caravan park that I'm a part player in up in Mission Beach packed itself up, told everyone to get out, and I think the sun's still shining. I have a sneaking suspicion December's budget's going to be down and the reviews are going to be a little poorer than usual, but can't really take a risk with caravans in a cyclone, I don't think.
Yeah, no, very true. Yeah, they're much further south. Yeah, it seems to have shifted a long way north now. Anyway, good to be prepared.
Yeah, no, it is as I think I've mentioned, my lifelong dream, given my previous life, to be in a cyclone. So I did almost try and get a leave pass to fly up, but yeah, I just couldn't make it work, and I'm glad I didn't because it would have been a waste of time.
Is it wrong to say that I'm actually a little disappointed that it's a bit of a fizzer? My kids were actually really excited to be part of a cyclone. I know that's that's not necessarily a good thing to admit or say, but yes, we'll see how the rest of the day pans out. They are saying there'll be a lot of rain on the back end, increasing the saba.
All right, shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
I just think that you can't really start tribe talking without having a bitch and moan about Elon.
It wouldn't be one of our episodes if we didn't talk about Elon.
No. So he's released his AI chatbot Grok in Twitter, and I watched a few little video demonstrations of it. I think, like with a lot of these tools, the idea is they provide efficiency and help you get to the kernel of the knowledge quicker. And what I've seen of this tool is it explains to you what's occurring, and then you can choose different ways it explains it to you, either normally or as a rude prick if you want a bit of a laugh. But I think for me, it's these kinds of tools that will test what is the functionality of AI going to be, and for something like a Twitter, what is going to be the value add, what's the additional information, and where is it pulling its information sources from.
Yeah, could you imagine a GPT that's driven purely on tweets like that? There would be some bizarre outcomes.
So just to clarify, so this chatbot sits inside of Twitter, and then if you're a premium user, you get access to this, and it's just so then if you've got a question about a tweet, you can then ask it then and there. Is that the purpose of it?
Yeah, I think so. The idea is to speed up that research or clarification process, but I think the selling point is that it's got a bit of an attitude with Elon's whole free speech, anti-woke. This is a bot that's going to tell you how it is, but given he's letting people like Alex, what's his name, from InfoWars back on, and it's just going to continue to descend into a cesspit. So if advertisers have said this is too risky, Elon said, I'll show you risky.
Did you guys see this week too, Microsoft Designer get dropped? And there were some comments on social that it was going to be a punch in the face for Canva. But I don't know if you had a chance to use it. It was so lackluster. And that's how I feel. There's a lot of Me Too tech being dropped that is just underwhelming.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do have this underlying risk in 20 years from now, though. Anybody listening to these podcasts, we're going to be the equivalent of people that protested Wi-Fi and so I'm trying to balance. Our role is to try and allocate capital towards things that are going to have a durable competitive advantage and that are going to generate our LPs a return. So that's the lens that we're trying to look at it through. But at the same time, it's hard not to feel like old man shakes fist at cloud.
Yeah, the way I look at it, Don, is we're long on AI and we believe it's not a fad, it's going to be around. But we don't understand which is going to be the vehicle that wins. Like, we know we can predict that AI is going to be around, but we don't know which is going to be the winning company. And that's why it's such a risky space for us, because it's moving so fast.
Yeah, we haven't seen the cannibalization of the underlying infrastructure moving wider and deeper into these little thin wrapper startups that are coming up. And we're going to be having a discussion today about a couple of them. But what we've got to be really careful about is that, yes, the AI has absolute applicability, and I think it's going to be a game changer. And some of the presentations at the 1013 runway party really drove that home for me. But from our point of view, where do you allocate the capital, A, and B, how do we support portfolio companies maintaining a culture and a climate that allows them to change rapidly, implement AI, and not get left behind? I think Aaron's blown away.
Yeah, sorry guys, it was lagging on my upload.
That's all right.
Hear me okay though?
Yeah, we can hear you good, Aaron.
I don't think the listeners are going to get much serious out of us today. It's the end of year.
It's good times.
End of year blues. But yeah, so look, watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space. I think one awesome piece of news that we saw this week was OneVentures getting some returns from Employment Hero, which I had heard from Anne-Marie Burkle. We had her on a previous podcast, but I didn't actually realize the quantum that they had returned. So their initial $8.8 million investment into HR startup Employment Hero turned into $116.2 million return. a 13
Crazy.
banger.
Impressive.
Well done. That is very impressive.
And I think it highlights, in order to have put 8.8 million to work, they weren't obviously the first investor, but they timed it very well in its growth trajectory to then be able to get that multiple.
Yeah, and great to see a return of capital for their investors. They've had, out of Fund 1, they've returned capital from a couple of investments now. So really well done to OneVentures. 8.8 million isn't a small conviction. Like, that's a decent investment. And it's great to see that kind of return.
The Anne-Marie episode will launch next week. And yeah, I found that really fascinating. Just the journey of OneVentures. I think also her empathy for the founder journey and talking about just some of the challenges and when it doesn't go well and how she handles that. I thought that a lot of people probably can think that venture capital is an emotionless game where you're just putting money to work and to hell with everyone else, but that's absolutely not the case.
No, what definitely came across in that episode was just how much she lives and breathes it with the founders, like in the trenches with them. They're not just in the good moments like these, but also through the harder times. And it's great to have investors like that understand the founder journey personally and then are actually in it with the founders in a true partnership.
Yeah, when she was talking about having to shred the files, if I was doing that at home and someone came in, I'd be saying, I've been cooking with chili. I'm not crying. It's just...
Yeah, I'm not crying. It's just a cyclone blowing rain in my eyes.
You're crying. Yeah, no, it's not an easy game, and OneVentures have had a really good outcome there and have a really strong portfolio. But another piece of news that came out this week was around Appen. Now, Appen reached, unbelievably, a market cap of $5 billion in August 2020, and this market cap is down to 100 million today. If I do the maths on that, comes out as quite a fall.
Is that a VC term?
Yeah. No, that's as good as we put it in our IMs. And again, this is a business that's had a couple of things. So I got caught up in the COVID investment boom and then now the post-COVID investment hangover. And a lot of investors, I think, thought it was a slightly different business, but it really was a body shop. And as one person in the article had said, it was clear from the accounts that it was actually a labour hire business because it relied on very cheap offshore labour doing rather low-value data analysis. They managed to sell a really good story there, but that story caught up with them, and then they've tried to pivot into AI, but that hasn't been going all that well.
Yeah, that quote about this being a labour hire business, it makes me... I would love to be able to do a bit of a post-mortem, go back and look through the investment lens at the different stages of their capital raising and do that kind of analysis of, if that is true, that it is more of a labour hire business, leveraging labour rather than technology, went wrong, if anything, during those investment decision-making processes.
How was that not seen? But at the same time, WeWork took long-term leases and sold short-term leases to shitty credit risks, and that managed to get to, 47 billion or whatever? So there's no shortage of examples of people in our profession tarring us with a ridiculous brush.
But at the same time, Don, we're assuming that, like, this is a public company, right? We're assuming that people have done DD and not just buying on FOMO. And it was 2020 when the valuation skyrocketed.
No, that's true, Jack. There are some
very true
stupid... That's why Jack's on the team. Jack, the analyst, always brings it back to the reality. But I really like the finance columnist Morgan Housel. He put it, all valuations are a number from today multiplied by a story about tomorrow. And I think during that crazy time, the story about tomorrow just became a bigger and bigger multiplier, and the reality of today almost didn't matter. But now what's caught up with everyone is that actually it's your reality of today, and tomorrow is harder than people imagine, and therefore that multiple's getting smashed.
Yeah, it's such a great quote. Over-indexing on the value of the future, or the promise of the future, or the pitch version of it in those boom times, and now just indexing back the other way.
Yeah. But for people that are getting that narrative right, that are getting that future value, there's an article out in Smart Company that 8 Aussie companies have raised 81 million, the biggest being Leonardo AI, but I thought that was interesting, a single article just listing out a whole lot of raises.
Yeah, it's really good to see. Like eight companies raised 81 million. Leonardo AI was the bulk of that with a $47 million raise in the AI space. But good to see a mix across different verticals too. It's not like it's all centered around, say, just fintech or something else. There's optical radar systems, Archaeus in there with a $4.4 million round. The one I was curious about, the eco-friendly packaging using sheep wool, Planet Protector Packaging, raised 12 million for sustainable packaging. I'm going to look into that one.
And there's another sugar-free / alcoholic drink producer that's raised capital.
It's interesting for me because that's a beverage startup, right? And the other one I was just talking about is a physical product in sustainable packaging. It's an interesting list, and I'd like to understand the technology that sits under some of these. But good to see the numbers. Good to see people back in market raising, and we're definitely seeing that in the quality of deal flow that's coming through. And having just completed last week our 9th investment, it's good to see good quality deals happening.
Yeah, we've been talking about product market fit a little while, and Nikki from Blackbird described Leonardo AI by saying that it's enjoyed an unprecedented beginning to its life, from a few thousand users when they first met Blackbird to 6 million after 10 months. If you're wondering what product market fit looks like, that's probably not a bad example. The thing that we become, I think it would be fair to say, more interested in and really trying to get underneath is durability. And I think product market fit actually has a shelf life, and that shelf life is becoming shorter and shorter. And so what we're trying to do is say, okay, it's demonstrated product market fit over a short period of time, but what actually makes that durable? What's going to be that competitive advantage?
Yeah, we've been discussing internally, and I'm trying to apply Hamilton Helmer's 7 powers, and we're really just looking at, like, we're trying to back really good businesses with a strategic advantage that will enable pricing power really over the long term. It's just something, we've been chatting internally about, and we're always trying to find a really good operator paired with a big with a big growth opportunity with a structural competitive advantage, and that to us provides a durable outcome.
It's the durability, and so we'll get into more of that in some future episodes, but I think more and more product market fit is going to be important, but durability and being able to work out, can this team execute on durable competitive advantages, what would they be, is just going to become more and more important. And for a lot of the founders that we're talking to, and even our own portfolio, how do we help them cast a longer term horizon of durability that gets past the short-term sugar hit of low-hanging fruit, early adopters? How do you cross that early adopters chasm? And then once you're there, how do you stay there? Because durability is really where the returns are going to come.
And just something we've been discussing internally as well is we're sitting at the pre-Series A stage, and what does that look like? Like when we see a founder, it's almost we have to believe that they can get to a strategic advantage, because right now it's such an early stage of their life cycle, but we're just looking at, can we see that in the market? So it'll be interesting, and I'm sure Blackbird have the same lens, and I'm not sure what stage Leonardo AI was.
That's quite a significant raise, given it's 47 million now.
AI, remember?
Very true.
Got a few zeros behind it.
A bit frothy out there.
Yeah.
The other startup that made the news, other than those 8 from Australia, it's been dubbed death tech. But it's interesting. We invest in some boring tech, but this one it came out of the US, called Nectome. Their startup claimed that they would preserve your brain, including all the synapses and all the data in it, to be able to create a digital version of it in the future. So I have actually heard this pitch before. There was a Russian startup that was backed by a billionaire out of Russia that claimed to be able to, how do you describe it? Transfer you into a cyborg in the future. But reading the article, this is completely unvalidated technology.
Yeah, fucking insane, but yeah, keep going.
It has a $15,000 price tag. The procedure is 100% lethal. So it's been copped a bit of criticism.
Yeah, but you're missing the point though, Aaron. The reality is this valuation, because this is an industry where every human on the planet is an addressable market, right? So you're not seeing the big picture.
Look, that is true. The lifetime value might be a bit low given they churn their 100% of customers. But yeah, it's copped a bit of criticism. Obviously, it's kind of assisted suicide is one potential use case, given at the moment all it's guaranteed to do is kill you, not necessarily save your consciousness to live in a cyborg.
Look, I think the key thing is the capitalistic system incentivizes all ideas, and there's no such thing as a dumb idea. There's probably just a dumb investor that funds it. I don't know, but hey, maybe there's some inspiration in there. But I think one of my favorite Black Mirror episodes is the one that ends with you're uploaded to the cloud and you can choose all of your worlds, and every morning is a new start. I think I like it because of the theme song. It's probably coming. I'm just not sure I want to be involved in it. I think when I'm done. I didn't know what it was like before I was born, and I'm not going to know when I'm gone. I think that's probably the best way to be.
This episode could take a turn really quickly.
Yeah, really, really weird. And yeah, if I do arrive at some pearly gates, the first words out of my mouth are going to be, "Oh, for fuck's sake!"
Really? That's what killed me?
Yeah, I'll see myself downstairs. I get it. I'll just head down there.
Oh, dear.
So there's dead and there's death tech. The step before death is bored to death. And there was an article out talking about how more and more PE is getting involved in boring businesses, B2B businesses that are recession proof. So welcome to the water team. The water's warm.
Yeah. Oh, you did well there on the segue, by the way, the linking death and boredom. But yeah, it's interesting in the economic cycles, how people come back to play in the space that we live and breathe. Boring B2B. As much as we describe it as boring, we see it as solving real problems for big companies in big markets. And yeah, a couple of PE investors were named, Flexstone Partners as one, with their investment thesis specifically as specializing in all the boring companies that no one wants to talk about at a cocktail party, which I quite like talking about the boring companies. Yeah. This could be why it's only the three of us ever talking to each other at a cocktail party.
So I've become quite myopic, it seems. Shout out to Adrian, who might be listening. I didn't reply in time for our group chat on a ride, so they cancelled it on me, which is pretty aggressive. But I thought that we had discussed it on our last ride, to which he said, no, you just spent the whole time trying to upsell your podcast and get more subscribers. So I just tuned out. That's ABC. Always be closing. But yeah, I think boring is probably a little bit harsh. What we're talking about is durable, sticky, behind the scenes, things that you wouldn't even have thought about that keeps this bizarro world of us moving, and that's our focus in trying to generate returns.
Yeah, not a flash in the pan magic act, but something true and substantive that's got long-term longevity.
And I think recession resilient returns is important. So I track like the transport sector, because that's often the canary in the coal mine. When less stuff gets shipped, less stuff gets bought, the flow-on effects. And some contacts I have in the transport industry, like this is just turning into a bit of a catastrophe of a Christmas season, considering what they've had. And the forward order book is looking awful. And once a body is in motion, it tends to stay in motion. And in the US, some of the early warning signs that are coming out of unemployment is starting to creep through. And I'll throw up a few little charts, which we haven't done for a little while. But when you look at historical turning and rate of change in things like rates, unemployment, all of that, once that starts, it takes a little while. And often it's because we've got central bankers that are too late to raise, so they set fire to the place, and then too late to bring the hoses. So I think that boringness is going to be a lot of value for investors in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that chart you showed a while back with the truck driver employment, US truck driver employment, like for me, and the sharp turn that had already occurred, like I think about that one a fair bit. I'd love to see an update on it. But I think we put this in the context of investors and the investment community and finance sector seeing these patterns and what are those early indicators. But I think for founders to think through these things, like to understand their own industry or market segment by looking at some of these early indicators that aren't the lagging measures. So I think it is a good little tip for founders to consider what data is it that they could be looking at to get some of those early reads.
And for the YouTube version, it'll be on there, so I'll add it. But for those at home, this particular one, this little chart is the current unemployment cycle versus previous recessions. So it takes all the recessions back from 1948, 1953, 57, 60, it just goes through that, and then takes the low in employment. And so what's interesting is the low in employment has been quite stable. Like when it bottoms out, like 1948, 3.4%, 1957, 3.7% bottom out, 1970, 3.4%, 1953 actually bottomed out at 2.5%. Even 2001, the last tech wreck, bottomed out at 3.8. But then once it starts to turn from the bottom, it just starts creeping up, and the percentage points increasing to that unemployment rate continues to rise. And again, be alert, not alarmed. It's weighting your thinking towards, am I going into boom and easier times? And if so, my capital allocation as a CEO can probably be one way. If the data is saying that from a probabilistic basis, there is enough science to say things might be coming a little harder, those environments tend to reward people that are a bit more resourceful than those that are just purely trying to plunder resources. And it's also important to remember that the so-called masters of the universe, who are supposed to know all of this stuff, like central bankers and economists, don't know what the fuck they're talking about half the time. And for the YouTube version, I'll put this chart up, but let me just bring it up for you here. As I scroll through my phone, which is 80% memes, 30% cannot be shared with the wider world, but I'll put this, I think you sent me this one, Aaron. It's Oprah yelling, you get a podcast, you get a podcast, you get a podcast.
Yes.
After the 10:13 event.
Pretty much everyone we meet at any networking event.
Like, hey, I'm John from Tribe. Will you come on our podcast?
Yeah. I didn't even think you said, hey, I'm John from Tribe.
Yeah. Did you even say your name?
I've got a podcast. I really like your podcast. I really love what you have to say. Did you see that video, The Podcast Police?
Yeah, that was a
Oh, yes.
That was so good.
It's a task force to stop silly white boys from... So, yeah, that's effectively us. We need to leave.
Pretty much. I'm expecting our doors to be kicked down at any moment.
Anyway, this chart, so this is the chart of what does the market think? And so this is the future expectations of interest rates. So for those listening at home, when interest rates were zero, like pretty well every quarter, the market was saying, oh, they're going to start going up. Oh, they're going to start going up. No, stay at zero. Oh, they're going to start going up. And it did that for what? Pretty close on 10 years. And then one day, it did start going up. And the market once it started going up, the market was forecasting, oh, it won't go up that much. Oh, it went up faster. It won't go up that much. Oh, it went up faster. And then it got to the turning point where the market said, oh, it's just going to keep going. It's just going to keep going. It's just going to keep going. And it didn't. It started to fall. And then it was, oh, it's not going to fall that far. Not going to fall that far. Like just every cycle.
John, are you trying to say that we can't forecast?
I'm saying be careful listening to idiots.
It's so hard to forecast.
It is.
We're never right.
But the core thing is the forecast does inevitably come true. Being early is indistinguishable from being wrong, but actually over the long term, if you give it enough time, these types of forecasts do tend to ring true. And just like physics, a body in motion tends to stay in motion. Now, for the last, 12 months, it's been saying we're going to have a significant fall in interest rates. Significant fall. Oh, next month, significant fall. Oh, Now, when it does have a significant fall, why would it have a significant fall? Why would central banks start to cut? Because they've wrecked the place. Because economic growth has stalled. And when you've got governments with the debt levels that they've got, it's going to be hard for them to come out and fiscally stimulate. So we're going to be back to the old monetary policy aspect. Now, for some businesses, they'll do well because what low interest rates and a loose monetary framework does is it blows asset bubbles. So if you're exposed to assets or certain types of assets, you get an absolute free ride. But for other businesses that are actually more exposed to economic headwinds, you get smashed in the face.
Yeah, I think there's a good little insight here for founders in that we can have these macro perspectives, and there can be a lot of talk of doom and gloom, and it's really hard to actually find the signal amongst all the noise. But I think really paying attention to your customer segments. So for me, I remember back during the GFC, there was all the rhetoric was cuts on discretionary spend, travel industry in decline, and at that time we were selling mostly to hotel chains with an back-end internet system. But what actually happened, right as we prepared to cut everything back, the hotels were looking for competitive advantage and to increase their star rating. And it turned out one of the things that would increase their star rating was having a certain class of internet system. And so it actually ended up being an absolute boom for us in an environment at which it would have been very easy to batten the hatches, shut down, listen to the macro view. And we were quite lucky. And I'm reminded of Simon Beard from Culture Kings when he was on the panel at 10:13 making a similar comment with COVID and coming into that expecting to be ramping down and massively impact in retail. And he just described it as the J-curve moment where everything just took off for him.
Yeah. And I think going back to where my little diatribe started, it was take certain forecasts with a grain of salt. But what you do is if you're thinking of a neutral line, we're not talking about massive swings of all in or all out. It's if your industry is giving you the signs like Aaron's was, then you're probably going to go from the neutral level to maybe 1 or 2% over your skis, pushing hard. But in this environment, and some people will be different, there's almost no data that I can see out there that is pointing towards a return to the boom time of a couple of years ago. And whether it's unemployment, whether it's trucking, whether it's the interest rate market, whether it's whatever, even the growth rate, we talked in a previous episode, just the growth rates of some of our fastest growing companies in the world are coming back, right? We've got enough data to demonstrate that. So in that environment, all we're suggesting is prioritize resourcefulness, maybe over resources. If you've got 12 months of runway, can you make that 18 months? If you've got a business model that requires absolute irrational exuberance from customers and shareholders and whatever else, is this going to be the right environment for that? It's just making sure that from a capital and time allocation point of view, you're looking at a few different data sets, but don't go all in, don't go all out. And gurus that say they know what's going to happen in the future are talking shit.
Yeah. One sector that seems to be well resourced and attracting a lot of funding is AI. And Jack, you touched on this before, but the news this week, 2 Aussie AI companies raising some capital locally.
Yeah, so the 2 companies that were raised this week is Relevance AI, which raised $15 million, and then the other one was Clove. Did you guys get a chance to read those articles?
Yeah. I not only read the article about Relevance AI, we're going to trial it in the family office because it's making some very bold claims that I'm interested to test out and see if it works. It's a Sydney startup that empowers businesses of all sizes to build their own AI-powered workforces in the form of AI apps or agents that can autonomously complete repetitive tasks. So we're going to give it a test and have a play with it. It's that kind of space that scares me, though, from a venture allocation point of view, because I just can't see why the incumbent big gurus aren't going to, if they smell and find that autonomous agent base, why are they not just going to add that?
Yeah, no, but I had a similar take. I'm super keen to hear how you find it when you give it a go, because my original take on first glance was, will this become a feature of a bigger incumbent? It just had that feel, but I really like what they're describing. If it can actually do what it's doing, it sounds super interesting. I can see the application. But
I think scale economies is where it's probably going to come through, plus network effects. If in the family office, in the various divisions that we have, that your average person with maybe some tech support can take this, create autonomous agents, get that value, and they can replicate that millions of times around the world and build that momentum. So then that way they've got a really engaged customer base that they can then continue to add value to on going to defend against others. Then that's a playbook that works. It's just a very high risk bet in a world of 15 million in the context of what US and European firms are raising to then buy market share. Like, that's the other challenge here. Even if you've got the best product, we generally find the best product never wins. It is the product that is able to have the best go-to-market strategy, which is a combination of marketing and lead gen and sales and channels and all of those things that win. And a way of accelerating that is monster amounts of capital.
Yeah, Jack, I'm interested in this Clove one from your perspective. So I have no idea about your household cooking habits, but as a younger bloke than Don and I, this concept of an AI cooking tool, is that something you would use?
Look, I haven't used ChatGPT for any recipes, so I doubt I'll use Clove. I'm a basic eater, right? Protein, carbs, steak, mash, and some veg. I'm a basic dude.
Okay, so you're not the ideal client.
You're not the target customer.
Like, I tried HelloFresh, but then I had to put the shit in the frying pan and mix it up and use a microwave. So
I loved HelloFresh. We had it for a while, but yeah, I think being
there is a great podcast on 20VC with the HelloFresh founder. Shout out to 20VC again. That is a really great podcast just on all of the shit that they went through to get HelloFresh. But talk about getting to a point of economies of scale that make it very difficult for people to get. If you think of a competitive advantage, wow, have they built that? But in all seriousness, we haven't probably spent enough time on Clove, but they've managed to raise $4.15 million, which is, I think, pretty interesting given it's pre-revenue.
Yeah, so Blackbird backed them, and Blackbird invests quite early, right? Like their first check a lot of the time, it seems. And I didn't get a chance to read their investment notes, but I did see the description on the LinkedIn for Clove. So they're a global recipe cooking platform which empowers recipe creators to share quality, easy to follow recipes online. So it's bringing the recipe creators and then all of the users, such as myself. If we want to find the good recipes, you're going to go to Clove. But then there's also the overlay of AI there. So I'm assuming it's like, hey, I've got these ingredients in the fridge, then it's going to marry them up with the recipes that must be on the platform. The thing that's going to keep the consumer going to Clove instead of ChatGPT is it's the actual creator side. So you can back that Don McKenzie, the local Brisbane chef, all of his recipes are going to be on the platform instead of me going elsewhere.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to give it a go. Given my children's food intolerances and my daughter's preference just to have chicken and rice every night of the week, it would be nice to be able to just actually look at the ingredients in the cupboard and have a recipe given to me that meets all of their needs without me having to go and hunt that out and search for it. I'd be really keen to give that a go.
Yeah.
I did just to call out there, it's Canberra alumni that have founded this company. So it's great to see in the ecosystem that these really successful companies are breeding employees that are now going on and building their own.
Spot on, Jack. Like that was always, in looking at innovation ecosystems and one of the metrics of a healthy ecosystem is when you start seeing early employees of one or founders of one start to recycle and spin out. So that is a great indicator. And when they do studies of successful innovation ecosystems, one of the things they look at is the spin out rates of early employees of tech companies going out and launching their own ventures and becoming founders as an indicator of a healthy ecosystem. So I think, your observation, totally agree. It's a great
PayPal mafia.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if it's not the founders, just all of the employees doing well through options and everything else, then going out and launching their own. Yeah, great positive indicator.
Yeah. Yeah, it was going to be an interesting one to watch. And Blackbird investing $4 million at that seed phase. It's fair to say Blackbird has started to come under quite a bit of pressure from a whole range of angles. Blackbird seems to become the whipping bird.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing this play out in the media. I feel for Blackbird. They have been in this industry, leading this industry for a long time, delivering a lot of value beyond the capital and leading a lot of different initiatives. And for me, I think the comparison to Tiger Global, Like that's a
Yeah, I think
huge
that's
stretch.
totally unfair. I mean,
Yeah.
That's rubbish. I don't even think you can compare those two in the same sentence. They're totally different investors, totally different approach.
Yeah.
and so there's a couple of things leveled at them. One, the whole Tiger thing is really around spray and pray and driving up valuations, which I don't think it's spray and pray.
No.
I think these are clever people backing smart founders. But then when it gets down to some of the complaints around pushing up valuations and things, I don't really know about that. But what I don't like is all the anonymous VC or investor sources that aren't willing to put their name or pen to paper. And to me, it's that saying, don't get bitter, get better.
Yeah.
Get better fucking deal flow, or go, where's your differentiated value? If you're whinging because somebody else has come in and has got a bigger check size and is able to see more value in it than you or whatever it is, I don't get it.
I don't get it. It really irks me when these anonymous sources, or if you've got something to say, stand up and say it. And if you hold that,
start your own podcast that you've got the username and password from it, you can't be cancelled. You can lose listeners, but you can't be cancelled. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Or buy your own version of Twitter, whatever is your thing. But yeah, this concept of pushing up that there can be unintended consequences of a large fund manager writing checks that can, sure, indirectly valuations go. But I don't believe for a second that Blackbird are there going, hey, we'll give you a better val if you go with us, as opposed to, they're not.
They're just not doing the volume either. If you look at a Tiger, or you look at who was Satoshi's son?
SoftBank.
They ran around indiscriminately putting massive, and they did have a lasting effect. But when you look at the volume of deals that Blackbird does, I don't think you could accuse them of that. And when you look at the check sizes, okay, I am intrigued as an example for Clove AI, $4 million seed. I don't know what the pre-money is, but in order to have a $4 million raise and still have the founders in control and still leave enough runway for the next raise and all of that, the pre-money val must have been fairly significant for something where it's not yet validated. So it's not my approach, it's not my style, but hey, it takes all styles in an ecosystem, and if you don't like it, bitching and moaning that they're taking away opportunity from you just seems to me to be a little bit daft. And it was Startup Daily who wrote an article about, is there a bit of narc and envy creeping into the Australian venture scene? And I thought that was quite a good little article that laid out various sides.
Yeah, it reminds me of something we talk about a fair bit as well. One way of buying into a company is through the check size that you write in the capital, and the other way is earning the right to be at the table with the companies and the value that you deliver beyond the capital. And that's definitely where we focus as a relatively small check size writer. We focus on massively outperforming on the value side. But yeah, equally with Blackbird, if anyone I know who has taken money from Blackbird has nothing but fantastic things to say about them and the support that they provide.
Yeah, and so then the negativity towards Blackbird continued through with an AFR article in none other than Rear Window, talking about the positioning and gender diversity. Did you get a chance to read that?
Yes, I did.
I'll read a couple of bits. You won't find a place in the Australian corporate landscape populated by more mediocre sycophants than the country's VC-backed startup community. VC is supposed to be all moonshots and big bets. We're supposed to get flying cars, the saying goes. Instead, the three big shops, Airtree, SquarePeg and Blackbird, just redirect super money to fund B2B tech startups. Stirring stuff. It goes on to say the decade-long bull run is now in the rearview mirror. Now comes the soul searching on cash flow, profitability, and how circle jerking on LinkedIn isn't actually a job. That last bit I disagree with.
If you can find product market fit.
The article goes on to effectively call Blackbird full of shit and does lots of talking and no action, and I think it's probably a little harsh.
I think, yeah, that action piece, when I think of what they do, I think that, I just have a real issue with the article. I struggle to even give the article airtime, honestly.
Yeah. Now, the core of it, is there issues in funding diverse teams, female founders? 100%.
Yeah.
And Jessie Wu posted to their defense. She said that the fourth state is supposed to be all about reporting for the public interest and exposing institutional and government wrongdoing. Now, there's no way that you can describe that article in that. Instead, we have a parochial press that's resolute to be butthurt about anyone that achieves a modicum of success and has the audacity to market themselves. Some recent reporting we've seen on VC and startup sector has made me reflect. It is a real shame that in Australia there is such a short runway until you're an incumbent, and taking you down a notch becomes a national sport. I don't think Blackbird are perfect, but I've seen them try pretty hard to wield the power and capital they have in broadly equitable ways without compromising the fiduciary duty they have to their investors. And I think that last bit is a really important bit. Now, does the entire industry need to put more effort and more focus into founding more diverse teams, more female founders? Absolutely. And in this example, the article had talked about 7 investments in a row that were all male teams. It later comes out that's not actually true. 7 announcements, of which they said they don't control announcements. The article then poo-pooed that and said that's rubbish. But actually, I don't think they do. We don't.
Yeah.
For various reasons, our founders either do or don't want to announce a raise.
Yeah.
For various reasons, they want to time it in different ways. Now, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think some of the criticism is better leveled at people that do lots of talking and no action.
Yep.
And I think we should have a bit of a discussion around that. But leveling a full charge at Blackbird in that manner, I think, is a bit unjust.
Comedians talk about the perfect joke being the joke that you deliver and it doesn't have one extra word beyond what was needed. And when I read what Jessie Wu wrote here, that's the vibe I get. I do think Blackbird have done a lot. Could they do more? Absolutely.
Can we all do more? And for us, we've spoken about it in particular episode when we were talking about the Give Tree issue around some of the actions we were going to take internally. The challenge is, and I must admit, I almost feel a little bit nervous raising some of this because you just don't know how your words are going to be misconstrued. So I'm just going to put it out there, but it's not as black and white, I think, for people like us, at least, to just arbitrarily have a target that says, okay, we're going to invest 50-50 female founders. When our deal flow comes through, can we get better at getting more diverse deal flow? Absolutely. But the deal flow that we have today is coming through. We have a fiduciary duty to our LPs. Plus, we're trying to build a business and stay alive and build and fly this plane at the same time. I don't think it's possible that we then start saying, oh, sorry, I can't invest in this. It doesn't meet this quota, because that's going to spell the end of us. What we can do is say, okay, what can we do to move the needle on the diversity side? Okay, if there's an issue with diversity inside this team, do they acknowledge it? If they do acknowledge it, are they willing to work with us to do something about it? Do they see the value in diversity? How can we be a positive part in that? That's what I think is within our control.
Yeah, there's a lot we need to do and can do. And I think, like anything, any early stage company, that the challenges are always having to prioritize different things at different times. But it's absolutely something that we are committed to. As a small team, it is a struggle to be able to do that effectively and as fast as we would like to.
To be honest, I do get a little bit awkward chatting about these conversations just because I'm still trying to work out what's right and what's wrong. Diversity is something we've spoken about internally. And like a question for you guys is, how do we view diverse teams? Like, is this just because it's 2023 and teams should be diverse, or is it the underlying reason is we believe that diverse teams and complementary teams will achieve a better outcome?
Yeah, I think absolutely the latter. All the data points to the fact that diverse teams, and this is the full spectrum of diversity and diversity of thinking and previous experiences, perform better. So that there is a commercial outcome from it, absolutely. But I think also...
I think it's both buckets. The data is very clear and the doing the right thing is very clear. Yeah. And sometimes the high moral ground is lonely and expensive for some issues. But here, the high moral ground, whilst lonely in some sectors, if done right, actually there is rewards for investors, in my view. And we've always spoken about complementary teams. And often a lot of the complementary team research has always been around styles and personalities, but complementary, therefore, by definition, diverse. I actually like diversity across a whole range of different factors: gender, ethnicity, childhood upbringing, backgrounds. When you have a look at environments that can handle that diversity, 1+1 = 3, whilst they're not easy and can lead to potential conflict, when you are able to maintain the foundational ingredients to support that diversity, my life's experience says the rewards are there.
Yeah, and I think to your point at the start there, Jack, like that willingness to step into that discomfort and the uncertainty in those conversations and being prepared to be met with a different perspective, I think is part of making sure that we are actually integrating the different perspectives. It's one thing to have diversity in terms of a metric measure, but to actually have integration and perspectives being heard does require us to have that bit of vulnerability, and it can be uncomfortable, but the value that comes out of it is pretty clear.
And to your earlier point, Jack, about the uncomfortability of talking about these things, I think you're right. I do try and shake some of that lack of self-confidence of what the judgment might be from just genuinely sharing a thought or a feeling. Now, if my thought or my feeling is wrong, please enrich me. And that's the beauty of a podcast and having direct access to people, that if we say something that is wrong, by all means, come back and have a chat. I just think it's important from the discourse that people be careful not to make others feel that they shouldn't have a view on something because they don't come from the particular issue. And for us, acknowledging again, we have a diversity issue that we have made a decision that we're going to work through. And the only way that we can work through that is being, I think, public about it. I think where a lot of people get into trouble is when they say they are doing something and can do something and will do something, and then are seen not to. So that's the bit that I just don't want us to fall into that trap of. We're at the point of acknowledging that we have more to do, and there are some things that we are doing, whether it's side letters with portfolio, whether it's just talking about these things and using this platform to have this conversation, to trying to get better female focused, more diverse deal flow by working with some of those startup and those hubs that over index towards female founders, trying to do those things whilst balancing in the trenches, trying to build a business that also has a fiduciary duty to investors. And that's the reality. And the world maybe should be different to that, but that's just not the world we live in.
Yeah. And the conversations we're having about other potential venture partners to bring in to inform our decision-making process, bringing in guests into our investment committee meetings to bring different perspectives and to challenge our thinking. And sometimes I'm a little torn about how much of that to share publicly versus it's just something we should do, because I always bias more to substance rather than talking about these things. But
I think you're right. And I don't want to be the talk crew, but in order to shine a light on some of these things, I think we have to talk about them and make other people feel okay to talk about them.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, that is really a good point.
People follow, and especially in some other groups, and we've had meetings with people before that have said, all this stuff you talk about, it's all bullshit, it doesn't lead to stuff. Actually, we think it does. We think that the stats do. We think this is also the right thing to do. And as long as we can balance the talk, and we only talk because we have a podcast, and if you don't like the podcast, the beauty of the unfollow and unsubscribe button works perfectly. But if we've said something that is wrong or our perspective is not right, we would love to be enriched ourselves. Absolutely. And if it then gives air cover for other people, specifically men, to then feel more comfortable to talk about what they're going to do or their shortcomings, I don't think that's a problem.
No, it's a really good point. Absolutely spot on.
And so then I think it was related and to diversity in the ecosystem, funding more female founders. But that hand in hand also has to come with creating a safer environment for female founders and female in any parts of this industry. And we had talked about some of the things we were going to be doing in Tribe, and that's where I feel comfortable that we're at least trying to get some balance. So if you come to an event, there's going to be a new terms of service, so to speak. There are going to be new rules around how things are handled, and just trying to create that safer environment. But it comes from an understanding and an exposure that actually that environment is often not as safe as I think a lot of men think it is.
Yeah.
And the initiative that was launched, the Grapevine, this week, I think is a great initiative for a couple of reasons. One, I've not been in this position before myself, obviously, but if I was to be in a shitty situation alone, would I feel better, or would I feel like there was some support if there was something I knew I could go to get some guidance and some assistance? And Grapevine, to me, looks and smells like that. And two, for a lot of people in this ecosystem, I don't think they realize the actual world that occurs. And so as long as it's done in a respectful manner, and then there's a way of managing it, shining a light on these shitty situations, so then that way there can be a move towards some behavioral change, some consequence change, and people going, oh, fuck, I didn't realize that this actually occurs. I think that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your first point, we know from the founder experience how much value there is in having a safe space or a network of others that you can go to share an experience, to deleverage, to get some insights or advice, and to normalize sometimes, is it just me, or did I get this wrong? Those sorts of feelings that we can carry. And so for me, having a space, a mechanism like this is fantastic. And I think it's obviously very needed. And to your second point, I think raising awareness, and for me, I'm perpetually on this journey of learning just what does happen, and I'm shocked by the stories that come out. And so I think the more we can do to bring them into a greater awareness so that all of us can have a greater understanding, it can only be beneficial.
So the website's askthegrapevine.com, and it lists the vine makers. So Grapevine is a bunch of women from the Australian startup community who got together with a clear and shared goal to keep the conversation alive beyond initial press coverage, to explore the systematic challenge faced by women and other minorities in the tech space, and to push for actionable and meaningful change. So it lists the vine makers of Kirsten Hunter, Lucy Wark, Misha Garg, Emma Early, Sam Garvin, Paloma Newton, Jessie Wu, and Margot Kilgore. Now, behind the scenes, Lainey Stead has actually provided funding for it as well. And so there's a venture capitalist putting money where her mouth is, providing support and funding for that. And we've put forward that we're willing to support. But I think an initiative that shines a light on the realities and then provides support, I think, is something that the industry should be getting behind. I think it's going to need some time working out what the Grapevine is going to be and what the ultimate vision and mission and how it's going to work. And if it's a website to get some assistance and shine a light on shitty scenarios, I think that'll be one structure and one level of industry engagement. If there is seeking to be some flow-on effects and changing behavior and changing consequence, then we've often talked about what we do with Portfolio, working with them to understand that change only comes when authority, power, and influence work together on a situation, and power defined by those that you expect and need cooperation from. And in order to get a broad set of industry changes and behaviors, I think the power here actually lies with the men, both let's separate them into the properly functioning men that can deal with their childhood issues in a functional manner and not be total assholes, versus the men that perpetuate these situations. It's going to be the good men that are going to be required to actually bring some of that. And I'm reminded remember that video of how to create a movement in 3 minutes, the lone nut guy?
First follower. Yep.
And they talk about it's really the first followers and getting those first followers on and creating an environment, because the future followers are there. They're going to emulate the first followers. And so I think if this group can really get that broader engagement, I'm always a little nervous with these things. I have had and probably still have a propensity to slip sometimes in accidental mansplaining or taking over something that's not my right to take over. And so I sit back a little going, fuck, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to be the first follower. My dance will be all wrong, and I will make mistakes, and I'll look like a numpty, but I want to be there. But I think, yeah, shout out for anyone who has the capacity and the curiosity to step up and get involved
And willing to learn.
Mm.
So what we'll be doing is sharing everything that we can share, talking about it openly through small platforms like this, and just wanting to be part of the solution. And where it's believed that we can be more helpful, I'm sure they'll call out to us and be a part of the solution. We'll put that all in the show notes. We've run a little bit out of time, and I think we'll have to kick it to the next episode. But out of this, I was going to come back to Blackbird just to talk about all the value that Blackbird does for this ecosystem. And a lot of their papers online are just really good, and we use them. And one that we were going to connect into is the go-to-market strategy. But I have a board meeting to go to, then I have a portfolio session to go to, then I have another board meeting. So this podcast is going to end, I think, in probably a really good place with something that's really important.
Yeah.
We won't try and add any other content. Please get behind it. And when ready, we're here to work.
Yes.
All right, what are we looking forward to next week?
I'm looking forward to the rain stopping. I'm sitting here hearing it pelting down now, and we've lost the home internet and the power's flickering. I'm looking forward to that bit being over. That's just as good.
That's as far as your... I'm looking forward to next week, because we're going to try and pull off our year-end review thing, and we've got a few ideas to try and be a bit creative on it. So I'm going to put my thoughts towards that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to just unpacking my stuff. Like, if I turned my webcam around and you saw the state of the room that I'm currently in. So I'm looking forward to just getting all that mess done.
All right. Yeah. Cool. All right. Being Wednesday, we'll catch you for pitch calls.